So in this particular session, what we're going to do is move away from our discussion of demand and enter into our discussion of supply. Now remember, demand before was from the perspective of the consumer, and now supply is going to be from the perspective of the producer or the supplier. Now, the supply therefore can be defined as the willingness of a supplier to sell a good or a service at a particular price at a given period of time, with all the factors being held constant. Again, here we are holding all of the factors constant beside price. So we simply want to observe when the price of the product that the supplier is selling changes, how they will respond in terms of the quantity that they would supply. Again, later on we can possibly relax some assumptions and observe what a relaxation of those assumptions being the other factors, when they change, what the impact would be on supply. And therefore, having an understanding of what supply is, we can observe how a supplier of ice lolly would change supply according to the price that they charge of the particular product. Okay? So, the supply schedule, in this information here, we have the price of the lollies from 50 cents ranging to as high as 250, and what happens with the quantity supplied. Now remember, supply, right, the supplier, the price that they charge for the product will act as an incentive. So the higher the price, the greater the incentive for the supplier to supply units. But the lower the price, the lower the incentive for the supplier to supply you with something. For instance, imagine you are home, and as a laborer you supply your services. Let's say as a plumber, you only would leave your home, you would only leave the comfort of your bed when the price that somebody is willing to pay you is high enough. So if the price is high, you would supply your services. However, if the price that they're willing to pay for your services is low, then you will not supply your services, or you won't supply as much. So that's a service. Is the same thing for the quantity, physical good being supplied. The higher the price, the greater the incentive for the supplier to produce. The lower the price, the lower incentive to supply. Okay? And we see that actually in our supply schedule. When the price was 50 cents, the supplier supplied 4 units. $1, 8 units, 150, 12 units, $2, 16 units, and 250, 20 units. We can therefore observe the fact that a positive relationship exists between the price of the product in question and the quantity supplied, in that as the price increases, the quantity supplied of that product, in this case ice lollies, also increased. And when the price reduced from 250 to 50 cents, it reduced from 20 to 4 units. So a reduction in price is met by a reduction in the quantity supplied. Let's construct our supply curve. The supply curve therefore illustrates the willingness of suppliers to sell a good or service at a given price over a given period of time, other factors being held constant. We have our supply schedule for lollies, quantity supplied, and then we relax our assumption. What will be the impact of a change in other factors upon the supply? In this case here, the factor that we're going to look at or relax is that we're going to assume that the supplier experiences an advancement in their technology to produce the lollies. So to construct our supply curve, we simply plot our diagram. We have the price of lollies again on the y-axis and the quantity supplied of ice lolly on the x-axis. And therefore, when price is 50 cents, 4 units would be supplied. When price is $1, 8 units would be supplied. 150, 12 units, $2, 16, 250, 20 units. And we can now connect all of the points, and we would have derived our supply curve. We realize our supply curve is upward sloping from left to right. Right? As we move from the left to the right, it goes upward. And this is as a result of the positive relationship that exists between the price of the good in question and the quantity supplied of the good. The higher the price, the higher the price, the higher the supply. The lower the price, the lower the supply, therefore giving rise to an upward sloping or a positively sloping supply curve. We therefore can conclude that when there are changes in price, all you would see is a change in the quantity supplied, because from 50 cents to 250, quantity supplied increased from 4 units to 20 units. We are still on the same supply curve. There is no increase in overall supply. There's just a change or an increase in the quantity supplied from 4 units to 20 units. Now, when we relax our assumption and we say that there's a change in technology, a positive change because there's an advancement, we realize that overall, for every price of the product, the supplier is actually able to supply more, because an advancement in technology simply could mean that it is more efficient to produce, right, at that relevant price, and therefore because of an increase in efficiency, it is profitable and wise to increase production. And therefore, when the price is 50 cents, instead of 4, 12 can be produced and supplied. At $1 instead of 8, 16 can be supplied. 150 at a price of 150, sorry, instead of 12, it's going to be 20. And if we jump to the last price of 250, instead of 20, it will be 28. What it means, therefore, is that we can construct a new supply curve that's going to be further to the right, because at each new price level, right, at each price level, a new amount can be supplied due to advancements in technology, which means our supply curve shifts to the right. We can therefore say that when there are changes in price of the product in question, it would result in a movement along the initial supply curve. But when there's a change in other factors, which we're going to discuss in a while, the other factors, is going to result in a shifting, in a parallel shift of your supply curve, depending upon those changes. So, let us conclude. When the price of the good in question changes, it results in a movement along the supply curve. That means the quantity supply changes. If you look at supply curve S, at 50 cents, 4 is supplied. At 250, 20 units are supplied. We are on the same supply curve. However, when we experience an increase in technology, which we have possibly reduced cost per unit of production, and therefore it makes sense to produce more even at the relevant prices, we will have an increase in supply. Okay? Supply changes. Right? And again, I have a typographical error here, I observe, and again, I apologize for this. Let me see if I can make a quick change. Okay, so we made the change. So supply changes. Okay? So therefore, what are the factors that could cause the overall supply of a producer to change? Right? Change means either the overall supply could increase or it could decrease. Well, technology could cause supply to change. Cost of the supplier's raw materials or the factors of production could cause supply to change. Availability of raw materials could cause supply to change. Weather conditions can cause supply to change. And indirect taxes or subsidies can cause supply to change. In our diagram here for the price of lolly, with regards to the quantity supplied of the ice lolly, we realize that we are depicting an outward shift to the right of supply, which means that supply increased. Supply, not the quantity supply, but the overall supply of the product has increased due to some particular factor. So if we were to interpret this, what it means is that an increase in supply can only be caused by technological advancements, not a decrease in technology, but an advancement in technology. Also, an increase in supply can be caused by a decrease in the cost of the supplier's raw materials. Yes? Because if costs per unit of your raw materials have reduced, it means that you can now produce more at that price because of a lower cost per unit. Also, your factors of production include land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial ability. And therefore, if labor prices have fallen, which means wages, again, this is another input cost, and therefore, it will allow you as a producer to supply more at prevailing market prices. So therefore, a decrease in the cost of the supplier's raw materials and or factors of production will result in an increase in supply. Also, an increase in the availability of the supplier's inputs or their raw materials will also allow for an increase in supply. For instance, if a supplier has the money to purchase their inputs, but the inputs are not available, then supply cannot be expanded. It's simple as that. So the issue is not just about the cost, but also the availability. So if there is a massive availability, an increase in the availability of a supplier's raw materials, it can result in an increase in supply. Okay? Alternatively, if there is a decrease in the availability of suppliers' raw materials, meaning there are shortages, it will result in a shift to the left in your supply curve. It's going to decrease. Favorable weather conditions also are factors that could cause an increase in supply as depicted in our diagram here. For instance, if you are a farmer and weather conditions are favorable, it's going to result in an increase in your supply. And let's even think about oil producers on the oil rigs. Whenever there's a hurricane, which is an unfavorable weather condition, it results in a closing down or skeleton staff of these oil rigs, and therefore supply of oil will be reduced during the hurricane season. So we realize that adverse weather conditions will limit supply, but favorable weather conditions can result in an increase in supply. And government subsidies, well, if you receive a subsidy or an increase in a subsidy, which is money to assist you in your production costs, it will result in an increase in supply. A removal of that subsidy or reduction in that subsidy, if you were once receiving it, could result now in a reduction in your supply because now you have to bear the full brunt of production. And indirect taxes, an increase in indirect taxes would result in a reduction in supply, but a reduction in those indirect taxes could result in an increase in supply. Okay? So we have ultimately concluded our discussion both of demand and supply. We have discussed the factors that could result in a movement along your demand curve and your supply curve. And if you recognize a change in the price of the product in question, the product that we are observing, will result in a movement along your demand curve and your supply curve respectively. But changes in the other factors, the factors that we held constant before, will result in a shifting of your demand curve and of your supply curve respectively according to what those factors are. Okay? So I hope this discussion on demand and supply was informative, and stay tuned to more videos as we discuss other issues in economics. Thank you.